The more you let go, the more comes back to you. At first hearing, this feels absurd, almost like a riddle meant to trip the mind. After all, we are trained to believe that the tighter we hold, the safer we are. Success, love, security. We are taught to grab them, guard them, keep them locked in our grip, as though they were fragile birds that might fly away the moment our fingers loosen. And yet, paradoxically, the very act of clutching makes them wither. The more desperately we try to hold, the more quickly life seems to slip through our hands. But step outside, and nature tells another story entirely. Stand beside a river and watch. The water doesn't strain. It doesn't muscle its way forward, demanding to arrive at the sea by sheer force. Instead, it bends, swirls, dances around rocks and fallen branches. And still, it always arrives, not because it fought harder, but because it yielded. Its power lies in surrender. Or notice the trees in autumn. When the wind stirs, their branches do not beg the leaves to stay. They do not clutch in panic at the thought of loss. They let go, gracefully, without argument. The ground becomes a blanket of gold, and in time, new life will grow from that letting go. What looks like death is already the beginning of renewal. Even the ocean waves seem to whisper the same paradox. Each wave rushes forward only to fall back. It gives itself away to the shore, yet the tide is never diminished. It returns, again and again, stronger, fuller, endless. So here is the question, one that our anxious world rarely pauses to ask. What happens when we stop gripping so tightly? What happens when we stop trying to hold every moment, every person, every outcome in our control? Perhaps life already knows the way. Maybe it is not our job to drag the river to the sea, but simply to flow with it. Maybe the leaves do not fear their fall because the tree has learned a secret we have forgotten. That nothing real is ever truly lost, it only transforms. The paradox is simple, but hard to live. The more you release, the more returns to you. Not always in the shape you expected, but in the form you truly needed. And when you stop forcing, life has a chance to surprise you. So, the invitation is here. A gentle one. Loosen your grip. Relax. Life has already been carrying you all along. There's an old story about a farmer who asked his helper to spend the day sorting potatoes. The task sounded easy enough. 3 baskets, one for the small, one for the medium, and one for the large. No heavy lifting, no back-breaking labor. Just sitting quietly and making small decisions. But by the end of the day, the helper quit. Not because the work was too hard, but because it was too exhausting. Hour after hour of tiny choices, tiny judgments, tiny efforts to control and categorize. It wore him down far more than carrying sacks of potatoes ever could. It wasn't the physical strain. It was the mental grip. We've all had days like that. Think about it. The endless emails, the messages waiting for replies, the decisions about what to cook, what to wear, what to buy. None of them are life or death, but together they pile up until you feel drained. It's not that life is too heavy. It's that we are holding it too tightly. I once knew a friend who loved kayaking. He said the first time he tried it, he was terrified of tipping over. So, he gripped the paddle like a lifeline, forcing each stroke with stiff arms. By the end, his shoulders ached, His hands were blistered, and he was more exhausted than if he had rowed twice as far. But then an older guide laughed and said, "You're not paddling with the river. You're paddling against yourself." He showed him how to loosen his grip, how to let the paddle dip and glide with the current, how to trust the water instead of fighting it. Suddenly, the same river that had felt like an enemy became an ally. Instead of forcing the kayak forward, it carried him. And isn't that how so much of life works? We imagine that control will bring us peace. If only we could manage every outcome, anticipate every risk, secure every answer, then finally we could relax. But what happens instead? We tighten our grip until even the simplest tasks feel unbearable. We spend hours sorting potatoes that never stop coming, paddling harder in a river that was always trying to carry us anyway. The truth is, we don't collapse from the weight of life itself. We collapse from the way we hold it, from the constant strain of trying to decide, to control, to perfect. The farmer's helper wasn't wrong. He simply revealed what most of us live without noticing. The endless effort of gripping too tightly wears us out far faster than life itself ever could. And maybe the lesson is this: exhaustion is not always a sign of doing too much. Sometimes it's a sign of holding too much. The farmer's helper didn't quit because of the weight of the potatoes. He quit because of the weight of control. That is the irony most of us live with every single day. It isn't the load of life that breaks us, it's the way we carry it. Think of the river again. A river never forces its way to the sea. It doesn't fight the rocks. It doesn't complain about the bends. It doesn't demand a straight line. It simply flows. And because it yields, because it adjusts, because it does not insist on controlling every detail of its path, it always arrives. Nature itself is constantly teaching us this lesson, though we are slow to listen. The leaves don't cling to the branches when autumn comes. The tides don't argue about retreating. Even our own breath follows the same rhythm. Inhale, exhale, hold for a moment, and let go. Try holding your breath forever, and you'll see how quickly control turns into suffering. Alan Watts once said, "Nature itself pries your fingers open and shows you the illusion of control." And isn't that what life keeps doing? Every time we try to grip too tightly, to a relationship, to a plan, to a version of ourselves that no longer fits, life gently, or sometimes violently, pries our hands open. It reminds us that what we thought we were holding was never ours to possess in the first place. And yet, we resist. We resist because we think control equals safety. But in truth, it is control that exhausts us. We spend our days anxiously sorting potatoes, endlessly making choices, trying to steer life like a machine that only moves when we push the buttons just right. But life is not a machine. It is more like a forest, a river, a sky full of stars. It moves in patterns too vast for us to dictate. When we insist on controlling everything, we cut ourselves off from that larger rhythm. We separate ourselves from the current of life. And in doing so, we trade freedom for fatigue. But the moment we loosen our grip, something changes. Decisions feel lighter. Relationships breathe. The world shows up with help we never could have planned. And opportunities appear the moment we stop chasing them. This is the paradox at the heart of living. The tighter we hold, the less we have. The more we open, the more flows through us. The river arrives not by forcing, but by surrendering. So too do we. There are two ways we can live. The first is the way of control. Imagine a king sitting on a throne, trying to dictate the movements of every person in the kingdom. Every decision must pass through him. Every action must be approved. Every voice must be silenced unless it agrees. On the surface, this looks powerful, but underneath, it is exhausting. The king cannot sleep because he fears rebellion. He cannot trust because everything depends on his command. His subjects obey, but they do so without joy, and the whole kingdom becomes brittle, fragile, tense, on the edge of collapse. This is what happens to us when we try to be monarchs over our own lives. We try to rule every moment, every outcome, every possibility. We attempt to script the future, rehearse every conversation, manage every detail so that nothing surprises us. But the cost of this false power is steep: anxiety, burnout, isolation. Life shrinks under our rule, and yet it never truly obeys us. Now imagine another way, not a monarchy, but a forest. In the forest, there is no single ruler. Power is shared. The trees stretch upward, drinking light. Their fallen leaves nourish the soil. The fungi underground weave hidden networks, carrying nutrients from one root to another. Even death becomes food for life. No single element dominates, and because of this, everything flourishes. This is the path of trust. Instead of trying to dominate life, we learn to cooperate with it. We loosen our grip and allow the unseen networks to carry what we cannot. We lean on others, and they lean on us. We stop demanding certainty and instead allow space for mystery. And in that space, something remarkable happens. Life helps us. Help arrives from unexpected places. Doors open that we could not have forced. What felt impossible suddenly unfolds with ease. One path isolates us, the other connects us. One drains us, the other nourishes us. One is brittle, the other is alive. The difference is not in how hard we try, but in how much we trust. Shared power nourishes all things without dominating anything. That is nature's secret. The forest thrives not because one tree insists on ruling, but because each allows the other to be. And so it is with us. The more we trust, the more we find ourselves in harmony with the greater rhythm already at work. The choice is simple, but not easy. Will we live like monarchs, clutching in fear, or like forests, flourishing in trust? There is a point in life where certainty becomes a cage. We spend so much energy pretending to know, pretending to have answers, to have control, to see 10 steps ahead. But what if the most powerful words we could speak are the simplest? I don't know. At first, those words feel like failure. We're taught from childhood that not knowing is shameful. In school, you're supposed to raise your hand with the right answer. At work, you're supposed to have a plan, a strategy, a forecast. Even in our relationships, we cling to explanations. Why this happened, what it means, where it's going. To say, I don't know, feels like weakness. But consider this. Light cannot shine on itself. A blade cannot cut itself. The eye cannot look directly at itself. Some things are not meant to be grasped. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only lived. Alan Watts often reminded us that life is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be danced. And in dancing, you don't demand to know the final step before the music begins. You allow the rhythm to carry you. You trust that not knowing what comes next is the very thing that makes the dance alive. The truth is, "I don't know" can be one of the most liberating things we can say, because the moment we admit we don't know, we stop forcing. We stop pretending. We open the door for life to surprise us. What I want is tied to what you want. And what you want? I don't know. Surprise me. That's not helplessness. That's wonder. That's curiosity. That's the childlike freedom we once knew before we tried to control everything. Think of the traveler who goes on a journey without a fixed destination. Every turn holds a discovery. Every stranger could become a friend. Every delay could reveal a hidden gift. Compare that to the traveler who clutches the map, who panics when the path changes, who treats every detour as disaster. Which one is truly alive? We think knowledge gives us safety, but often it's the openness of not knowing that gives us life. To say, "I don't know," is not to give up. It is to give in, to lean into the current, to let the forest guide, to let the tide return in its own time. And perhaps the greatest mysteries, love, joy, meaning, are only available to us once we stop demanding to know and allow ourselves to be surprised. So here we are, back at the paradox where we began. The more you let go, the more comes back to you. At first it sounded like nonsense, a puzzle designed to confuse. But now, after walking through the river, the potatoes, the forest, and the mystery, perhaps it no longer feels like a riddle at all. Perhaps it feels like the rhythm that has been quietly guiding us all along. Life has never truly asked us to carry it. It has only asked us to flow with it. And yet, we exhaust ourselves with clenched fists, fearful hearts, and endless attempts to grip what was never meant to be held. But look around. Everything in nature is already teaching us the way. The leaves do not cling when it is time to fall. The tides do not resist when it is time to retreat. Even the stars themselves burn out, so that new stars may be born. Decay and impermanence are not enemies. They are allies. They are the soil in which renewal grows. When you loosen your grip, you don't lose your life. You gain it. You create space for what is real to arrive in its own season, in its own way. That is the quiet promise life has been whispering all along. You don't need to force it. Life already knows the way. Think of the river. It doesn't panic, though it twists and turns, though boulders fall in its path, though storms swell its banks. It trusts. And because it trusts, it always finds its way to the sea. Think of your own breath. It doesn't cling. It comes and goes freely, and in that rhythm you are sustained. The very act of living is already proof that letting go and returning are woven into your being. So why not live the same way? Relax your grip. Trust the tide. Allow yourself to not know, to not control, to not decide every outcome before it happens. What is truly yours will come, not because you chased it, not because you clutched it, but because you created the space for it to arrive. And when it does arrive, you will be ready. Ready, not because you prepared the perfect plan, but because you learned the deeper wisdom, how to open your hands. So let the river carry you. Trust the season. Trust the rhythm. What you are seeking is already on its way, and it knows the way better than you ever could.